In this demo, I'm going to show you the API proxy and proxy development in Apigee. Before going to the proxy development, let me take a step back to explain some of the key concepts within Apigee. In Apigee, there is a concept called Apigee organization. In the Apigee X, which is a cloud SaaS that's version of Apigee, an Apigee organization is always mapped one-to-one with a GCP project. In this example, I'm going to use the Apigee organization called DynoLab. Within Apigee organization, all of these objects will be stored. And one of the important objects that we are going to use is called environment. And the environment is often associated to the SDLC environment. We've got maybe dev environment, we've got SIT environment, and so on. For the environment to be able to access, we typically need to group it by a concept called environment group. And within an environment group, we can have one or multiple environment associated to it. Environment group is also the place where we define the host name. In this example, we're going to use the environment group of hostname api-dev.dynolab.io. So now let's switch to the key concept of API proxy. So API proxy, as the name suggests, basically sits in between the API consumer and the backend. So I'm going to click Start to create a new API proxy. You can see that we have several different templates that allow us to build a proxy. Most of the customer will start with creating a reverse proxy, which is the most of the common one, but feel free to explore some of the other proxy available, including the recent newly added AI template proxy. These are all pre-configured with some of the out-of-the-box policy embedded. The other most commonly used proxy is if you are having already an open API specification, you can choose this proxy template and then you upload the open API specification and Apigee will be able to automatically detect the path and so on, and then it will create a template on behalf of you. So in this example, for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to choose the reverse proxy, which is the most common one. I'll start to give a proxy a name. Maybe I can say it's a customer desk proxy and the path that define my API. And this is the backend endpoint how my API proxy want to reach. So upon I define my backend endpoint, in this example, I'm just going to hit an example demo http.get. I can click next and decide, do I want to deploy into an environment which we have explained earlier on. So I can choose to deploy it in one of the environment, and when I'm happy with that, I can click create. So I'm going to fast forward this and show you an example pre-created proxy that I already have. Over here, I've got quite a fair bit of example proxy, and I'm going to choose one of the proxies called the products retail proxy. So this is the product retail proxy, and within the retail product proxy, you can see that I have managed to deploy multiple revisions on the proxy within the time frame itself. I can now click on the develop, and this is where the place that allow me to start developing the proxy by adding a lot of policy. Now, if you look at how the graph goes, it starts from the API client, which it first will hit the path that we defined earlier, and it goes to via the arrow as a request, and it first will hit the set of a pre-flows policy that we add. I can add the pre-flow policy and by clicking this button, and I can choose whether I want to have an existing out-of-the-box policy or I'm going to choose the new policy. Within the new policy, this is where you can start to choose one of the out-of-the-box pre-created policy, whether they are categorized as mediations, whether they are categorized as security, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to click cancel, and you can see that in this example, I already have a sub-spike arrest policy to prevent the sudden spike. I already have also a verify API key policy to make sure that I want to pass a policy from the header or the query parameter. and I can go all the way back. You can see that we have a multiple subpath, what we call a condition of flow. If we need to explicitly define a particular rules, and it will hit something called target default. And this target default is actually the another of entities within the proxy, which determines what exactly my backend that I'm going to reach. In the arrow back, you notice that this is the arrow um, going back to the API consumer. It will also execute a list of policy according to the flow that we define as a response before it eventually reaches to the API client. Okay. Now, just to get things started, what I'm going to do is opening up my simple client application. And because this demo require an API key, I will be demonstrating it by accessing from a client application called Hopscotch. And if I were to hit the URL endpoint, which is api.dynalab.com, that's the value that I got from the environment group a while ago, and I'm going to choose the slash retail v1 slash product. That is what I define in my proxy. Because I'm going to click send in this example, when I choose send, I'm expecting an error. That is because I'm expecting an API key over here. Now, one of the cool feature in Apigee is to be able to use the debug console here. So if I now were to start a debug session, and I'm going to generate the request again with even if it is an error, you can see that this is the second time that I've got an error. Now coming back here, you notice that the API client, it's going every single step to the policy that I've got. In this example, I managed to successfully go through the spike arrest, not a problem, assign message policy, and all the way up into this verify API key. Because I do not pass on the verify API key, that is where I'm getting an error. So this is a demo that we able to hit the Apigee even it is blocked by an API key before even hitting the target.